Today's video is going to be much different than the ones that I normally do in this channel. This is going to be a reaction video to Boosted Media's latest video called Reviews Are Becoming a Problem. The link will be in the description. I would heavily urge you to check it out because it talks about certain topics that I've been seeing in sim racing and I've been talking about over the last 4 or 5 years. And it's really interesting to talk about those topics. I've also reached out to Will to check if it was okay to do a reaction video on this, and he said it was fine. I would ask you not to create a witch hunt out of this, of certain topics and certain things that I'm going to talk about. Try not to extrapolate some of the points into content creators, videos, or brands, because that's really not the point. The point is to, for me at least, to analyze certain trends that I've been seeing in sim racing lately. I'm not going to react to all of the video. The video is 22 minutes long. I'm going to react to parts of it and give you my commentary about it.
But yeah, I'm choosing to do the video now simply because we're coming into the ADAC conference, the Big Sim Racing Expo in Germany in the next couple of days. And there's going to be a lot of hype. There's going to be a lot of content creators making videos of all sorts of different nature. And, you know, it's a time that it's very easy to get caught up in the hype and maybe spend money that you shouldn't be spending, maybe, you know, get sucked into a new product that you don't really need, and so forth. So I wanted to talk today about the nature of reviews and content on YouTube in general around the tech space, and particularly as it relates to sim racing, because obviously that's my area of expertise. And just share some of my thoughts for your consideration, basically open up the discussion. This is something that, you know, comes up in discussion, particularly on Reddit, quite frequently. I haven't seen any discussion about it for quite some time myself.
The Reddit point is quite interesting because I've been the target of certain accusations in Reddit a few times, and that's quite interesting. But the first point is really also very much more important, in my opinion. It's in regards to, you know, any new equipment. Sim Racing Expo is an excellent place to check out what is coming out, but then, you know, hype comes in and it's very easy to get sucked in. I've done a couple of videos in the past about basically screwing FOMO. Just look at things from an objective point of view. It's very hard oftentimes to do it, but try to figure out that most of the times keeping it simple, it's actually much better in sim racing, because the more stuff you have, the more difficult it is to manage a sim rig, manage your computer, and all of that. So try to keep everything as tidy as possible, as simple as possible, and that will save you a lot of headaches and also a lot of money. I know this channel has a component on the reviews, but the reviews, for me, in my point of view, is just to show what is interesting. That doesn't mean that you should really buy it.
The landscape has changed an awful lot, not only in the number of content creators that are doing it, but in the actual relationships with businesses and so forth. When I started, you know, sim racing was still pretty small. It was primarily dominated by, you know, relatively small companies, family-run businesses and so forth. And, you know, so when we were dealing with them and, you know, getting equipment into review and producing content and stuff, it was more like dealing with a bunch of mates really than it was, you know, dealing with large corporations. And, you know, if you look at the bigger tech industry, obviously that's big and corporate, and, you know, sim racing has started to sort of move in that direction as well. So, you know, back in the day, so to speak, the sim racing manufacturers generally were chomping at the bit to have somebody with a relatively large audience review their product. You know, it made it very easy for me to say as a reviewer, these are my conditions, you know, this is what we do, this is what we don't do, you know, we don't accept money for reviews, blah, 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 all that stuff. And it was never really an issue. You know, occasionally there might be a bit of pushback, but we could generally resolve it amicably and it wasn't an issue. As large corporations have started to work their way into sim racing, they have a lot of their own policies, so that's one thing. Oftentimes, and you guys might have seen a tweet that I just posted recently, I got an email from a company that actually isn't a sim racing company, but, you know, a larger tech company wanting me to review something. I'm not going to name names here because, again, it's not a witch hunt. It's you know, it's an industry-wide trend.
Well, for the first point, Will is talking about the big corporate influence, and this is totally true, and I'm seeing it happen more and more often with certain companies that try to be more corporate. They will have more corporate speak in their messaging, and oftentimes, like Will is saying, is that they will actually hire a marketing agency between yourself and the company. They try to isolate it because, you know, they start to see us as influencers and not as reviewers. This creates a couple of problems. One of them is a engineering problem because we test their stuff. We want to give you information, and I have had this situation not long ago. One of these companies had a marketing agency. I wanted to speak with an engineer or somebody in the company about a certain issue that I was having, and I had to speak and had a big issue in latency of communication because that guy had to be a middleman, and that middleman had to talk with somebody in that specific company. This is practical for me, an issue that is in reality practical, but there's also another part of it, is that the marketing agencies are showing you that there is now going to be a big pivot in the sim racing sphere, and the more they start to come here, that we're moving more not only towards what is happening now in overall tech, but also I think, at least that I'm seeing in sim racing, that this is moving also a little more towards what happens in the beauty industry and Instagram. I'll speak a little more about that in just later in the video. But I'm seeing that the corporations speak that they use and the way they try to obfuscate, it's starting to become more of an issue. And another point that Will also makes about this is it talks about guidelines and guidelines for videos. Guidelines for videos are normal and have been happening for years. In some cases, guidelines are actually quite helpful because they tell you, okay, we have this, we have this, we have this as features. And sometimes they have requests, and the requests are rather good. I can give you a couple of examples. What they specifically asked me, please try this in Euro Truck Simulator. I don't do Euro Truck Simulator, but I do have Euro Truck Simulator, because they wanted me to test a specific part of their system in Euro Truck Simulator, and in reality, they were right. It was about the shifter, very, very useful. Another case, they had a condition, and the only condition that they received from them was at least spend 30 days with this product. Don't do a rush review. I don't want the rush review, and that's totally fine. That's totally fine guidelines that I'm happy to comply with. Of course, if the guideline is stupid, is not for me to be complied about, and you'll talk about that on emails. But generally, going into the case that you even give a guideline, they have to receive my own guidelines, and my own guidelines are basically the Bible. If they don't like it, they can go somewhere else.
We're seeing a lot of sponsorships starting to come into the fold now. And, you know, it's basically following suit from what we saw in the wider tech industry for probably the last 15 years or so. But, you know, we're finally starting to see it in the little niche that's sim racing, which is, in my opinion, at least great. I think that it's absolutely fantastic that content creators that put so much effort into their videos are actually able to make a full-time living from it. It means more content for you guys, more exposure to sim racing in general. And, you know, the more people we have, again, sharing their opinions on products from a reviewer perspective, the better, in my opinion. So I personally have absolutely no issue at all with anybody being sponsored, so to speak. But where I start to have some concerns, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is, and again, I want to hear from you guys what you think about this too. This is just my opinion, but where I start to have some personal issues with it is when the lines start to get blurred, like as we were saying before, between what's a review and what's an endorsement. And in particular, content creators that chop and change between the two different pathways. So, you know, for example, one moment you might be watching a review video and maybe it's the first video you've seen from that particular content creator, and it is a genuine review of a product that, you know, either they've been sent for review or they've, you know, purchased themselves or whatever. But, you know, it is a genuine review. And then the next time you see that content creator, you might actually be watching an endorsement of a product that they're actually being paid to produce for the manufacturer or reseller or whoever. And as a viewer, if it's not abundantly clear exactly what the context of that video is, if the previous video that you saw was a review, you're going to assume that the video that you're watching now is also a review. And if it isn't, and if it isn't clearly disclosed, you're not going to be getting the proper context as a viewer to understand that what you're watching is actually a paid endorsement of that product rather than a product review.
This is exactly why I wanted to talk about Will's video. In the past, I've done a video called What I Don't Tell You About Reviews. It talks about the whole process of reviewing a piece of equipment from the technical part, but also from the management part of sending guidelines and having the companies actually accepting the guidelines. and how to do disclosures. Personally, as I spoken in the video, I just do a blunt disclosure. This has happened. I may have an affiliate link. Take it or leave it. That's it. I don't try to justify myself saying I'm so pure and even though I have an affiliate link, I really don't make money from it, or try to make a disclosure 3 or 4 links back in a web page. That doesn't happen. But I really want to talk about this because of the trends of sponsorships versus reviews, but not just from the point that Will is trying to make. I wanted to go a little bit deeper than that. I don't really think that sponsorships are a big problem in sim racing, at least not by himself. It will be, for me, totally natural to see an esports person, sponsored by a certain equipment company, or seeing a content creator sponsored by an equipment company. No problems whatsoever. The problem may arise when a piece of content is created, either about the products they actually are sponsored to use, or when the content creator decides to do a review while in sponsorship with another company. Those create conflicts of interest, and they need to be mentioned forefront, and maybe sometimes they are not at the levels they need to be. But those are not really the problems that I'm seeing in sim racing, or the trend I wanted to talk about. This is essentially it. This is in a comment that I've made in regards to a Reddit thread that had me probably targeted. I don't remember if it was directly or not, about how reviews are honest or not. And in that, I say, I'd wager that in 5 years, the sim racing reviews in the way we see now will stop. Currently, companies have zero sway of pretty much anyone that does a review. At least that's the case with all the reviewers I know, including myself. If this paradigm already receives accusations that whoever does a review is sold or doesn't have the courage to say bad things, companies might just very well stop sending equipment and curate an influencer culture. This is already happening, but it will accelerate to eventually everyone that's equipment is an Insta or YouTube influencer under contract with the company being at the same level as the beauty industry. Currently, the paradigm is that review informs the viewer of the equipment, software, upsides, downsides. Currently, sim racing has, at least in general, I think, the best disclosure standards in any tech industry that I've seen. If I go to cameras, if I go to phones, if I go to computer parts, nobody will tell you the source of that equipment. Nobody will tell you that they have affiliates or they have websites where you can do basically some sort of comparison of prices and they get the commission. Nobody tells you about any of these things. There's maybe a couple of people that do it. One of them is Gerald Undone, and probably another person that I don't know about or I can't remember from the top of my head. In sim racing, most of the reviewers will tell you exactly what's going on. Let's take a step back and being cynical about this. That's normally how I try to be, but because I'm old and stupid, if you look from a perspective of a company and you boil it down cynically, what is essentially a piece of content, no matter what it is for them? It's essentially a way to move boxes. That's essentially what it is. A review for them is a way to try to move boxes, but they don't exactly have control of what the reviewers say. So if they take a high-end approach from moving boxes alone, they might as well just send the boxes to influencers, and instead of sending boxes to reviewers, because with reviewers you'll have to end up to talk with people that have the user base in more their interest than they have the company in interest. In reality, most of the reviewers that I know don't really care about the company at all. They really care about if the product works or not. They care about their content that they do. But for the influencer culture, if you look at how some videos in sim racing are created and how are they created and starting to become more curated, is that they remove all of the context of the product. They show you the product being used in cool circumstances, and the product is really not talked about. And that's why you're seeing more and more in Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts that there is a very big separation between the realities of the product and creating the content with the product. This in reality is following more the trends of what they do in beauty than they do it in tech. And this is exactly why I say that in the near future, companies will stop essentially try to engage with reviewers. And in reality, I think there's already a couple of companies that do that. One of them quite big, at least I suspect. I don't see many reviews from these companies, from the large YouTube review pool that you have. And you'll see more curated towards content creators, and that's okay. That is a strategy, but in a long term, that means more and more companies will start checking this out and moving against the reviews, because really there's no point for them. Might as well just save them a few bucks and actually curate something that they can control. And this is why Will's videos is so important. He talks about the same trends in a different way. I have my own opinions about it, but he talks about these trends to a much wider audience that I could ever reach. And this is super important, because if we do not talk about these situations, if we do not keep the community or the industry accountable, it could be very much the case that in the near future, or in not so much far future, you could see the industry changing in ways that you will not accept or you will not recognize. So this is my piece about the subject. I hope you've liked it, you found it informative. Check Will's videos out and let us know in the comments what you think about this.